Welcome to this bite-sized PD on interpreting your math growth data. We are going to go over the different reports that are available to you as a math teacher, how to interpret those reports, and most importantly, what to do next. Reminder, if you are looking to be able to compare your average RIT score for each class to something, this is a table of how students did nationally in each benchmark period. So if you want to see how your students are doing compared to national norms, you can use this table until we have enough data in Canyon School District that we can create our own norms for Canyon School District students. As we look at the growth, maintenance growth from one testing period to another should be about 2 RIT scores. And this vastly is different from our MI growth, which was 50 quantiles from each testing period. So keep that in mind as you are looking at your student growth. If students are in the red, yellow, or orange, obviously we will want greater growth than 2 RIT scores. To look at student growth, go to the MAP growth reports down below your class profile and your student's profile. Scroll down to access the growth reports and click on the Achievement Status and Growth Summary with a quadrant chart. Fill out the information for your particular class and click on Fall so that we are comparing winter benchmark to the fall benchmark. Then click on Create Report. This report gives you a great overall summary of how your class did with growth. Each plus sign on the chart represents a student. This chart graphs a student's growth percentile against their achievement percentile. This is an honors class, so we see high growth and high achievement along with high achievement and low growth, which is very typical of an honors class. You do want the majority of your students in the green and in the orange for winter. The green is a high growth, high achievement. Obviously the ideal situation, but if a student has a lot of unfinished learning, they may not have been able to reach the high achievement yet. So high growth and low achievement would be a second best. We don't want to see students in the red with little to no growth and no achievement. Here's a quadrant of a regular class. Notice that the majority of the students are in the orange, the low achievement, high growth, and green, high achievement and high growth, which is what we want. Even though the students in the orange didn't meet the winter benchmark for high achievement, they still made high growth, which is great. In this class, there are 5 students in the red. As a teacher, you'll want to identify these students and their needs so you can provide supports for them so they can move into the orange in spring. If you hover over the plus sign, it will tell you the name of the student. The next chart will give you more information on each student in each quadrant. At this point in the school year, you'll want to make sure the students in the red are being considered for a math intervention class such as Math Lab or Everyday Math in the high school. Below the quadrant is a spreadsheet summary comparison of the students' fall to winter tests, including a colored block indicating where the student falls in the quadrant sort. The other columns tell you about the student's fall test, their winter test, and if they met expected growth or not. The comparative column is to the national data. Next year, like we mentioned, we hope to be comparing just to the Canyons District data. You can download this into an Excel spreadsheet by clicking on the spreadsheet button in the top left-hand corner. Once in a spreadsheet, you could use the observed growth column to find an average growth for your class. Below the data table is a data summary of the class, including the percentage of students who met or exceeded the projected RIT scores. This could be helpful to you in determining the overall growth of your students. Back on the reports page, the next report under the ASG quadrant is the ASG projection or summary report, which is just a PDF version of the table on the previous slide. The other class reports, class profile, student profile, and family report give the same information as before, just with the winter data. Just like in the fall, you will see a class profile report detailing how many students have taken the test and have an official RIT score. The whole class percentile tells you how your class did overall on the winter assessment. If you'd like something to compare this to, you can compare your class RIT score to the national table we showed back at the very beginning of the presentation. The test details by student give an overall look at each student on their winter assessment. This chart shows you a distribution of student performance organized into 10-point ranges of RIT scores. Each stack represents students who scored within a 10-point RIT range. You can use this data as a starting point for forming temporary, flexible learning groups in your classroom. This chart shows how your class performed for each individual instructional area. Each row represents a distribution of achievement percentiles for an instructional area. You can use this chart to understand which instructional areas are relative strengths and areas for improvement for your class. For this particular class, they are almost equally strong in all instructional areas except for statistics and probability. The teacher will probably want to use the learning continuum to identify which standards in particular this class need extra support with. This chart shows you a distribution of students' performance for a specific instructional area, in this case geometry, organized into 10-point ranges of RIT scores. Each stack of student represents students who scored within a 10-point RIT range for the instructional area. If you click on the More Information About This Chart link below the chart, you will find a link to the Learning Continuum, which will contain the standards for this particular instructional area. Below the RIT bands is a chart that shows you a list of your students with details about the tests that they've taken and the results they've received across all the instructional areas. Each row represents a student and their performance on a particular test. You can use this chart to understand individual student performance. If you click on a student name on the left-hand side, it will take you to a more detailed report for each student.
So now what is different is this tab that is the projected proficiency, and we're going to now look more into what the projected proficiency looks like. So in high school, they will project the proficiency of the ACT. In middle school, we'll look at it in just a minute, but for high school, it gives the two overall benchmarks for proficiency for the ACT. The stringent benchmark of 24, which selective schools, including some state schools, hold to, and the less stringent ACT benchmark of 22. The left-hand side tells you how many students are projected to meet each benchmark, and on the right-hand side, it tells you what the student needs to score in the spring in order to meet the different benchmarks. And then in middle school, it's the projected proficiency for the end of level, the RISE test, what their projected proficiency will be. In high school, then it is broken down by student. So the below the projected proficiency is a table of each student and their projected proficiency on the respective assessments. And same with middle school, below the table, it has each student and what. So in this case, in 7th grade, what their winter RIT score is and what the projected spring RIT score would be and their end of level projected proficiency. Once you get into the student reports will give you more detail about each student and how they performed on the winter assessment. Just like the fall assessment, it also includes highlights and areas of strength and improvement for each student. So as a core teacher, you may not look at each student individually, but if you are a math intervention teacher, this information can be super helpful in determining which students need what support. So again, what is now different from the fall is their growth quadrant. The quadrant chart is there. And if you click on the arrows in the top right-hand corner of each box, it will expand and show you more detailed data. So here's a high growth, high achievement student. They are in the green. This particular student has high growth and high achievement, which is the most ideal. Continue doing what you're doing. This student is in the red, the low achievement, low growth. The math intervention teacher will want to look at the instructional areas to figure out where this specific student needs more support. Here is a high growth, low achievement student, which is very common for students with unfinished learning in an effective learning environment. The math intervention teacher will want to continue with the supports that they are currently giving to this student. Then we have a high achievement but low growth student. So refer to the standards report in the instructional areas in the student profile to find skills and concepts that will continue to challenge them. Additionally, in the student's report back on the main student profile page, you can see the instructional areas for each student. Click on those arrows to expand the box to get personalized details about each student in each of the instructional areas and to look at progress towards growth goals and see their growth goals. In the instructional areas, you can check or uncheck the boxes to see which standards the students need reinforced or need support in developing. Math intervention teachers will want to look at that report for these students in the red and possibly the orange. Click on the arrows to see the growth goals, look at the growth goals, and set growth goals. Core teachers will most likely not be setting growth goals for individual students, but SPED case managers and math intervention teachers should consider creating growth goals for their students they support. Goals for students are automatically generated based on national norms. The national norms suggest that in order to keep kids at maintenance, students should grow by 2 RIT scores per testing period. Intervention teachers may want to create custom goals for individual students to accelerate their growth. Core teachers don't have time to make growth goals for all students. In this particular case, an intervention teacher would see that it took 20 RIT scores to move this student out of the red and into the orange. So they might make a similar goal for winter to spring in order to move the student into the yellow. Back on the main page of the student reports, if you scroll down, you'll get a projected achievement for the ACT for both middle and high school students. If you hover over the last data point, you'll get a black pop-up with projected ACT performance for the student if they continue on their current track. In the top right corner of the student report page, you can print and share reports with students and their families. And you'll want to select the family report to print to hand out to parents. The other report is 28 pages long per student and contains way too much information. You can print a family report of all your students at once. Here's an example of the family report. It contains explanations for families, the students' data, and how families can use this information to support their students. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can reach Allison or Rachel, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And thank you for watching our Bite-Size PD. Here's how you can get credit.
And trivia question, how many times or how long did it take Allison and Rachel to make this recording and not laugh?